The defending Stanley Cup champion Panthers eliminate the Toronto Maple Leafs. Meanwhile, the Dallas Stars and the Edmonton Oilers prepare for the Western Conference Final. We've got all that and a whole lot more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers. Celebration time in South Florida there. A big, pretty dominant Game 7 performance. What was the difference for the Panthers in Game 7 against Toronto?
The best way I could describe it for the Panthers is their ability to protect the neutral zone. I mean, you think about for the Panthers going into Game 6, it was a 0-0 game going into the third period, and then mistakes in their own end, and then the Leafs scored 2 goals off the rush. And to think that even in the first 12 minutes for the Panthers, it was 25-0 in shot attempts. And then the Leafs get 7 straight shots on goal, and 2 of them coming off the rush from their bottom 6, and Stephen Lawrence, former Panther, and Scott Lawton. And then once the Panthers went into the second period, it was just clean north-south hockey for the Panthers, and then it ended up manifesting in 3 goals, an explosion for the Panthers, very similar to how they did it in Game 5. So that's another thing for the Panthers, and just how they were able to just be ready. And the thing is, Gil, that the Panthers went into this game very calm. They talk about these are games that you talk about for multiple years. These are the ones that you remember. Matthew Tkachuk spoke about how their game is built for Game 7 in long series. The Panthers play marathons consistently when it comes to how their style of play just wears teams out. And it goes back all the way to what Paul Maurice spoke about in one of the docu series for when they won the Stanley Cup. Pound their bleeping D so that in Game 7 they have nothing left, and it really proved in Game 7 against the Leafs.
That physicality is such a part of the way the Panthers play. Do you think they did wear down the Maple Leafs in this series?
No doubt. And to think that, I mean, it's 12 playoff games and Austin Matthews only has 1 goal against the Panthers, and the fact that there was multiple times throughout this series that you see multiple minute-and-a-half shifts whenever the Panthers are able to get complete line changes. Even in the beginning, when the Panthers didn't score, they had the Nylander-Tavares line on the ice for more than a minute and a half, and they really exposed the likes of a Morgan Riley, Simone Benoit. And honestly, even though the Panthers lost in Game 6, those habits really went into their game on how they were able to continue to pin, win their board battles, make the low to high plays, screen the goaltender. And honestly, it was just about things averaging out for the Panthers. And honestly, it's funny because I don't usually get nervous before elimination games, but it was starting to really creep in whenever the game started. And hey, the Panthers were able to just get it done.
Talk to me about Sergei Bobrovsky. He does seem to come up big in big spots.
No doubt. And it's funny because of how active he was with the stick early, making the sweeping plays, batting pucks out of his own end, and also being really aggressive with the poke check. So that's another thing that Sergei Bobrovsky just continues to just play big, use his technique as his big advantage as not the biggest goaltender. So that's another thing of Sergei Bobrovsky continuing to come up big. 3 straight Game 7 wins for him. And I mean, the Panthers overall as a franchise, they're 4-1 in Game 7s in their franchise's history. So this team franchise wise, they come up big. Paul Maurice now 6-0 in Game 7s. Brad Marchand 5-0 in Game 7s against the Leafs, and even scored tonight on the empty netter, and also got a big assist on Eetu Luostarinen's deflection goal in the third period. So the key players come up big. I got to give a lot of credit to Seth Jones, even though there was a goal that was disallowed due to him crashing the net, but the patience he had to keep the puck, not touch the puck when they were regaining the zone to get that goal to Jonah Gadjevich. I mean, it was very similar to the Cale Makar play a few years ago in the conference final. So just awareness from him. This is why you make that big trade for him. And this was before the Ekblad suspension. That just high IQ play constantly from him. Although the power play hasn't been the best for the Panthers, he's just taken very calculated risk on how he keeps the pucks in the zone, which we saw especially in the beginning of how the Panthers were struggling with their pinches in the beginning of the series, and that led to those multiple rush chances. But the Panthers a lot more calculated as the series went on.
Give me an unsung hero for this series. I mean, we know the headline guys. Give me an unsung hero.
I got to go with Eetu Luostarinen, a guy who is not a household name when it comes to the Florida Panthers because of the amount of superstars that they have, but just the physicality, meshing well with Brad Marchand. He's not necessarily a two-way forward offensively, but I mean, getting a big one tonight, and also key minutes on the penalty kill, which the Panthers were able to still neutralize the Toronto Maple Leafs in the series. And also, I want to give the whole fourth line, because let's not forget, Paul Maurice made an entire change in game 3, bringing a whole new fourth line in to the mix, and trying to counter the Toronto Maple Leafs speed game. They use it with their heavy game, and those three guys of Nosek, Gadjevich, AJ Greer, those are the heavy guys who live for the Florida Panthers way as far as getting the pucks and keeping it in the offensive zone.
So we're back to the conference final. It'll be the Carolina Hurricanes as the opposition. What concerns you most about the Carolina Hurricanes?
The Carolina Hurricanes ... again, which funny enough, we're recording this at 10:29 p.m. on a Sunday night, just not even 15 minutes after the final buzzer. And this 2 years ago to the date was Matthew Tkachuk's game 1 winner in quadruple overtime at 1:56 in the morning, even though technically that was on May 19th for him. And just the fact with the Carolina Hurricanes is their style of play is very similar to the Panthers. These are two of the top Corsi 4 percentage teams. They wear you down. They're heavy. And the thing is, a lot of people talk about the Carolina Hurricanes as talking about boring hockey, but the best comparison I can make when it comes to the Carolina Hurricanes is like San Antonio Spurs in their prime years with Greg Popovich, St. Louis Cardinals when they were winning the multiple World Series in the late 2000s, early 2010s. They are the definition of that, as a team that's constantly in the second round, 7 years in a row for them, I believe. And just the fact that they're so coached well by Rod Brindamore. Freddie Anderson, when he's healthy, he's one of the best goaltenders out there. He doesn't get talked about. There's so many names that just don't get talked about. Jacob Slavin, he's the number 1 defenseman. If the Norris Trophy wasn't a points-based award, he'd probably win it every single year. Brent Burns, he may be 40 years old, but he's still a veteran that is big for their blue line. Jordan Stahl, he's likely going to be matched up against Alexander Barkov at the start of the series. That's a good defensive forward, a Stanley Cup champion when he was with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that's another thing for the Panthers, on just the fact that there's going to be a lot of low-scoring games. But the Panthers, they set a record for the last 30 years that hasn't been done since 1993. 17 different goal scorers. So when it comes to the depth, I do believe that the Panthers do have an advantage, but the style of play and structure, I think Carolina could actually give the Panthers quite the challenge, a lot more of a challenge than they did in 2023.
Well, it's going to be a very interesting series, no doubt about that. Armando, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
They can find the podcast, Locked On Florida Panthers Podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. They can follow me personally at MondoMan12 on X, and on Blue Sky. Follow the show, because it's definitely a happy podcast. And although Gil said that it's a celebration for the Panthers, I don't see it as a celebration, because the Panthers, they've been here before. It's business as usual. They're only halfway there. So the Panthers are just moving on. It's 2 days until the conference final. They packed for a week, so not even going back to Sunrise, Florida. They're going straight from Toronto right to Raleigh on Tuesday night. So hopefully they keep it going.
All right. Thank you so much, Armando.
Absolutely, Gil. Thank you so much.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you could stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Stars, Joey Erickson. And Joey, how is the team feeling after that exciting overtime win over the Winnipeg Jets?
Well, they should be pretty confident, and I think that was echoed throughout the locker room following the Game 6 win. A tough series. Of course, Winnipeg was the President's Trophy winners, and they showed it a few times in the series, but you have to give Dallas some credit. They bounced back after each loss, and they finished off a Jets team that played their best game on the road in the postseason, and Dallas was able to come out on top. They finish it on the power play, and that's sort of been their calling card this postseason so far. Timely saves, timely goals, and you can win a lot of games this time of year doing that, especially when Jake Ottinger has been as superb as he has been in between the pipes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ottinger was one of the difference makers in this series, where Connor Hellebuck was kind of up and down, but Ottinger was consistently either really, really good or even better than that.
Correct. Hellebuck sort of figured it out finally, but maybe it was too late for him in the Jets, unfortunately for Winnipeg. But Jake has just been so darn good for Dallas. He's faced the most shots so far in the postseason. He's made the most saves, and he has a save percentage at .919. I think the goals against is 2.47. Like that's really good. But it's those types of saves he's making. Had a huge one on Connor in the 1-1 hockey game in the second period, and he made it look easy. And of course, the sprawling save against Appleton late in regulation, not how he would have drawn it up. It's probably a goaltender coach's worst nightmare, seeing the way he was sort of facing the net, but he did that a couple of times in the series, and he got the job done. And yeah, he was just a skosh better in this series than the best goaltender in the world over the past few seasons.
You mentioned special teams. Talk to me about the importance they played in this series win over the Jets.
Well, their PK has been brilliant. It's 86%. I think they only gave up one power play goal in the entire series. Maybe it was two, but it wasn't much. They have just been lights out, and that goes back to the Colorado series as well. And they gave up 3 against a very talented Colorado team. The power play is the best power play out of all the teams left. It's at 30%. And McGranlund, of course, had a couple of goals in his hat-trick game, and then they finish it off in early in overtime in Game 6. And that's something Dallas didn't have a ton of last season, but it is something that if it carries over into Edmonton, they should be okay. But it's been massive. And I know we talk about the cliches all the time with special teams, goaltending, you got to get depth scoring and all that. Stars have done that to some degree at different points in the series. But it's nice to have a power play that works. It can dig you out of a lot of trouble, and their power play their penalty kill has gotten them out of a lot of trouble because they've taken some very dumb penalties. I hate to use that adjective, but they've just taken some pretty wonky penalties at times. And a Winnipeg team that made a lot of teams pay pretty much the entire season, and it dried up on them in this series.
Talk to me about Thomas Harley, because Peter DeBoer singled him out for praise after the game. What did he contribute besides obviously the game-winning goal in overtime?
Well, he's been just incredible, and I said it after the game. It just almost felt right that he deserved to score the overtime winner. He has a clutch gene. He has 6 overtime goals over the last 3 seasons. That's the most out of any defenseman, and that includes the regular season. So I know 3-on-3 isn't anything special, but that was obviously a big time goal. But it's just the amount he's grown. He has really improved on the defensive side of things too. And one thing that I found really fascinating was a couple of games ago. I think it was after Game 4 when the Stars won. He mentioned if he's doing good on the defensive side of things, like that's all he cares about. And I don't know if that's something you would have heard a few years ago out of somebody like Thomas Harley. You expect more of that from Miro Heiskanen, the other Stars' number 1 defenseman. I think that just shows the level of maturity he has now, because he is the stud defensively. And he can score. And he took over the number 1 power play unit for Dallas under once Miro Heiskanen went down. And now it's nice that they have both. Imagine Miro Heiskanen's your number 2 quarterback on the power play. Like, you're living right if you're Dallas. And now that they have both of them back fully healthy, it looks like Miro, they're letting the gunners off, so to speak. They're letting him go. That is great news. But Harley's been the MVP for Dallas all season long, assuming that responsibility, playing heavy minutes. It's nice Miro's back to give him a bit of a rest every once in a while.
Edmonton Oilers up next, another tough opponent, another challenge. What concerns you most about facing the Edmonton Oilers?
Yeah, well, last season I felt very confident going into that series, and Edmonton, I think, humbled me and other Stars fans. I'm more anxious heading into this season for sure, because I felt like Edmonton certainly got better over the offseason. They may have not shown it during the regular season. I mean, they still had over 100 points, but they have really turned it on. I guess what concerns me from a Stars perspective, if Stuart Skinner shows up and he figures it out like he did last year, and he wasn't great early in the series, but from games 4 to 7, he was lights out. And if he finds his game again, like, that's always going to be tough. Also, I think it's depth scoring for Dallas. We've talked a lot about Mikko Rantanen, and he's sort of carried the load, but there's a lot of other Stars that haven't factored in. Jason Robertson without a goal, Matt Duchene without a goal, Marchment has 1 goal. There's a lot of the depth that of course the Stars boast, and we talk about. It's nice to have Wyatt Johnston be your third line center. It's nice to have Jamie Benn as your third line winger or whatever, but if they're not producing, it really doesn't matter. And against an Edmonton team that is deep, and they're getting production from not just 97 and Draisaitl, this is a different question than it maybe was even a year ago, although it was the depth for Edmonton that really showed out for the Oilers in that other series. But the thing that really sticks out to me, I actually wrote these down today. You look at the power play numbers last season in that series, Dallas went 0 for 14. And the Edmonton scored 4 power play goals in the series. The 5-on-5 goals, 4 for Dallas, 14, 13 against. So they outscored them at 5-on-5, but it was the special teams that really mattered and what really dried up for Dallas. So if they can rectify that and get some help from some of the depth pieces, I think they'll be fine.
How do you think the Stars try to address McDavid and Draisaitl?
Well, I think it's kind of a 2-part question in a way. Are they going to play together? That's always a question. I know Knobloch likes to kind of pump them together or put them together if they feel like they need to kind of create some offense. But what they have to try to match, they're going to get a heavy dose of 4 and 55, I would suspect. Harley and Heiskanen are going to take a lot of those minutes. And I think the approach for Dallas is you try to contain them as much as possible, but you got to win the other matchups. And that sort of goes back to the depth. Can you win some of the other matchups against the bottom 6? Can you win some of the matchups against a Klingberg or against a Darnell Nurse? And if they're able to do that, they could be in good hands, but it's going to be a tough task. Just both of these teams, talent-wise, probably the deepest in the Western Conference, and it's going to be a battle. And I'm looking forward to seeing it take place over the 7-game series.
We all are. Joey, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find us Locked On Stars on YouTube, of course. You can find us on all your podcast listening devices and softwares. Of course, you can find me at JoeyTheJet19 on Twitter. Locked On Stars as well on X and all that good stuff to follow along. And appreciate you, Gil, for having me on. And it's going to be an exciting conference final next few weeks.
No doubt. Thank you very much, Joey. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Oilers, Nick Zararis. And Nick, they're back in the conference final. Let's talk a little bit about what it took to get past Vegas, first of all.
Something I didn't think they had in them. I'm just going to be very frank with you. Everything you saw from this group in the regular season, they looked like a second-round exit at best. They really struggled to string together good hockey, especially down the backstretch of the regular season in March and April, where every game felt like pulling teeth because they were missing 4 or 5 guys every single night. And then, as you saw in the first 2 games of that Kings series, when guys haven't played in 2 or 3 weeks, it takes them 2 or 3 games to get back up to game speed. But they played really, really good 5-on-5 hockey. They thoroughly controlled play at 5-on-5. They rolled 4 lines that through 4 games had a majority of the scoring chances, the high danger chances, and the actual goals. So it was really all coming together, and they've really shown a forward depth that wasn't there in the regular season. And the ironic part, of course, is that in the closeout game against Vegas, the 2 marquee free agents they signed the first hour of free agency on July 1st last summer, Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson, they were both healthy scratches. They didn't play in the closeout game against Vegas. So they've really gotten hot at the right time. And if you're an Oilers fan, the thing that's encouraging is there's room to get better here. The penalty kill is still only at 67% through the first 2 rounds, and they've yet to score a power play goal on the road through 2 playoff series. So if you get the special teams to complement the 5-on-5 play, there's still meat on the bone here for the Oilers.
Goaltending always important, and it seems like in the playoffs, the goaltending steps up. Talk to me about that.
Steps up is a polite way to describe it. Those first 2 games were an adventure in the Kings series. Then they rattle off 6 in a row with Pickard in there. Pickard gets hurt in the game. They lose to Vegas, and they go to Skinner, who loses the game in overtime. They lose the game with 0.4 of a second left, the most agonizing way imaginable to lose. And he comes back with 2 straight shutouts. It helps that they've played really good hockey in front of them, and that's always going to be the Oilers' key to success. As long as their goalie doesn't need to be the difference between winning and losing, most nights their team in front of the goalie is talented enough where as long as they get 900, 905 goaltending, I mean, I think they're at 898 through the first 2 rounds, and they're here. So if they get even marginally better goaltending, they still have a lot of room here to play better than they have. And they've gotten to the conference final only playing 12 games so far.
Everyone knows McDavid, Draisaitl. Give me some unsung heroes that have gotten the Oilers this far in the playoffs.
It's really been a depth adventure. Corey Perry has been remarkable in these playoffs, only playing 12, 13 minutes a night, effectively just stapling himself to the net front, eating cross checks and drawing attention from defenses. Evander Kane getting reinserted into the lineup has made a massive difference, especially on the forecheck, where he's been agonizing for other teams. Him, Hyman, and Nugent Hopkins comprised a really quality second line for a good duration of that 6-game winning streak, where they were just playing the game in a phone booth where the puck was either below the goal line or in front of the net, and it really gave other teams a difficult time. And then you throw in Kapanen, who got them to the conference final with the overtime winner, and Vasily Podkolzin, who was playing 10 minutes a game as a Canuck last year, has chipped in a couple goals playing either with Leon on the second line or in a really sparing depth role on the fourth line. So it's been really encouraging to see the Oilers' depth really step up in a way that it didn't last year.
from an Oilers perspective, what's your biggest concern heading into the conference final?
The special teams haven't been as good as last year, and we play about 75% of an NHL game at 5-on-5. So the Oilers playing as well as they have has offset that. But you look at how Dallas has played so far in the playoffs, where they've largely lost their 5-on-5 minutes, but they have been dominant on special teams. And it really creates a head-on-head disadvantage here, where Dallas is more than happy to give you possession, let you take chances, because they've got a great goalie in Ottinger. You've got quality defensemen in transition and returning Heiskanen and Thomas Harley. So for the Oilers, it's really, can they squeeze more out? And I know that sounds a little crazy to say about a power play that's running at 25% right now, but the penalty kill needs to be better. And if they're going to win this series, they're going to need their special teams to be elite, because Dallas's are.
McDavid, Draisaitl, when do you think you'll see them together, and when do you think you'll see them on different lines?
So to start the playoffs, they were on different lines. That first game against the Kings, and then it got out of hand, and they needed to get back in the game. So they went to Connor and Leon. They lost anyway. Same thing in game number 2. Game number 3, they go McDavid, Draisaitl, Perry, Kane, Nugent, Hopkins, Hyman, and say, we'll figure out the rest. The winning streak goes on. And then until the last 2 games against the Kings, once they got out to the 3-0 lead in game number 5, they juggled the lines entirely. They split them up. They put together a defense first lineup that was really about getting the puck in deep, holding Vegas in their own zone, and really trying to milk clock. And then same thing in game number 6, they slide capping it into the Arvidsson spot next to Draisaitl, and they effectively tell Leon, all right, you're going out there against Eichel. Every time Eichel's out there, we're going to play hard defense, and we're going to win this game on our defense, because we think that's what Vegas is going to go for. Vegas is going to play a very conservative game. So I think to start, you will probably see them split up, but I think that'll oscillate on and off depending on game situation, because when they're in defense first environments, they generally like to split them up to try and get more game control, because if you split them up, you can have the best player on the ice for 20-ish, 25 minutes a game, as opposed to just the overlapping minutes.
Talk to me about the blue line, the defensemen, because we've talked a lot about the forwards. Who are some of the key defensemen that need to be at their best in this series?
So Evan Bouchard's had a really good playoff since game 3 of the King series. Those first 2 games I've largely thrown out of my brain as far as evaluating how the Oilers have played, because they were just so horrendous. But since then, Bouchard has been a lot steadier, a lot calmer. They have gotten the best hockey of Brett Kulak's life at 32 years old. He's playing almost 3 more minutes per game than he did last year. Jake Wallman and John Klingberg have been outstanding as a second pair, which if you told me a month ago would be the case, I would have looked at you funny, because the 10 games Klingberg played from the end of January through mid-February before going on LTIR, he looked like a guy who hadn't played hockey in 12 months. He looked slow. He looked out of sorts, and he's been great. He has been actively good. Him and Wallman together have really given the Oilers a lot of depth on the back end, and they have the wrinkle that Matthias Ekholm should be back at some point in this series, which will push that'll push the last defenseman out of the lineup, Troy Stetcher, who drew in earlier in that series against the Kings, stayed in, and then has drawn in at various points throughout the playoffs so far. So they have the opportunity to get even deeper at another top 4 defenseman, and really have probably the 6 best defensemen, maybe of the entire time of McDavid and Draisaitl being Oilers.
Makes a big difference, no doubt about that. So, Nick, the Oilers win this series if
their star players outplay Dallas's star players. This time of year, it's the big dogs, and Dallas has one in Rantanen, who's had the best playoffs of any forward in these playoffs. And Connor and Leon, by any stretch, haven't been bad, but they haven't been as dominant. They haven't put up as crazy of counting stats the longer the playoffs have gone on. If Connor and Leon can play Rantanen effectively to a push, I feel like the depth is there for them to win on the margins against Dallas. But by and large, and this ties into what I had said earlier about special teams, that's where they need Connor and Leon to get going, is on the power play, because they've had really cold stretches through these playoffs on the road where they go the whole 2 minutes. they don't get a single shot on goal. They're too stationary. They're not generating enough looks. They're not making the defense move. They're not making the goalie move. So if you're looking for something to swing the series in the Oilers' favor, look for Connor and Leon to get the power play going again.
All right, Nick, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Locked On Oilers is on all the major podcasting platforms and YouTube. On Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, it's Nick Zararis or Nick Zararis Sports. Thanks so much for having me, Gil.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You can find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guests, Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers, Joey Erickson of Locked On Dallas Stars, and Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we're here every day, Monday through Saturday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the NHL and the hockey world. So hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll be back tomorrow with more of the biggest stories from around the league. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.